Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. Now for this week's tutorial I wanted to focus mainly on vehicle designs. This is something you haven't seen me do too much on this YouTube channel, so I wanted actually to try out a new technique. I don't normally typically use any 3D in my work. However, I wanted to see if it actually lent well to the overall design process or if I even needed it. So in this portion of the video I'm going to be focusing on producing the line work for the finished image. In the next video you'll actually be seeing me painting this digitally as well. Now just the line work itself took about 7 hours to complete. That includes the 3D portion as well as the finished line work. Now a lot of this did have quite a bit of a learning curve because it's been a while since I've actually tried to model something in 3ds Maya or Maya, so it forced me to experiment a lot more with techniques that I first of all haven't tried in quite a while, and also experiment with new ones as well. So as you can see I have the basic mesh and I'm working around that mesh to figure out the basic composition of the image. Now what I found worked the best is I found that using the floor grid actually helped more than anything else. The rough placement of the object did help a bit, but the moment I started deviating from that shape and restricting myself to that outline, I began getting more productive results that I appreciated a lot more. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that I started approaching it like a normal concept piece, and I just started really working out the design in rough until I had something that just worked for the concept and the idea that I was going for. So this concept is based off essentially rescue helicopters, but this is more of a futuristic style vehicle. So in this case the vehicle is expected to go in hurricane-like winds or possibly in outer space, and because of that it still has the bright colors so that it's visible from far away, but it also has extra armor plating to protect it and its occupants during that process. Also, this vehicle also has much larger stabilizers, so it actually has two in the front that you'll see me adding in the later stages of the line work, as well as the main thrusters in the back of the vehicle. And that's just to give it a lot of power. It can't necessarily go quickly, but it's essentially a more rugged vehicle that's designed to withstand really cumbersome weather elements. So as you can see right now I'm using the same process, and I was experimenting a bit to see how I was actually going to approach this design. I ended up roughing out larger shapes and then from that working out the details, and I found that was the best way to get an appealing shape and design was by doing it in this manner. So once I really started experimenting with the shapes, I started getting something that was very unique and interesting as well. Obviously I try to keep everything slightly realistic, so any shape that is being put on there I do include some of the 3D elements so that you can actually tell what the volumes are of the object as well. So there's a lot of plating, especially in the front windows. So essentially everything has been reinforced to help give extra strength and to essentially help the occupants get to their destination and retrieve or help individuals that require their assistance. So there's two forms of exhaust in the front to help with the massive motors. This is actually an extra doorway for them to come through in case they need to. As you can see I added the basic structure and then I started adding the details within. That's generally what you would do normally for any drawing, and that's how I've been approaching it for this technique as well. So this drawing, the painting portion actually probably took the least amount of time. It probably took about 3 to 4 hours. The most technical portion is the line art though, because it does have to make sense structurally. If it doesn't, then the human eye does tend to pick it up fairly easily because we're generally pretty good at determining whether or not something is structurally sound. So as you can see, I've added essentially some extra supports and packets essentially attached to the side, so that if this vehicle actually did end up crashing, there would be med kits on the outside to make it a bit easier for the occupants to actually retrieve these, because they'll essentially come out and fall out. Just working on the support structure now for essentially the propulsion of this massive vehicle. So it has quite a bit of propulsion power, because it does require the raw power in order to make it to its destination, because of the climate it normally has to go through. If you notice that tiny little black sketch that you see on the side, that's actually my initial concept sketch that you saw me working on in the beginning. I kept it out just so I could refer quickly back to it and to make sure that I'm somewhat close to that. Obviously it'll depend on what I'm trying to achieve as a final image. So I'm experimenting essentially with the propulsion units right now, seeing what structure would be, first of all, most interesting, and try to make some sense on how it would actually be attached to the rest of the structure. So you will see me later on actually change quite a bit of that just to help make it work. What I may try to do, it'll depend on the amount of time I have. I may actually attempt to do a side view of this vehicle, which given the level of detail would actually be fairly difficult to do. I may attempt to do that and possibly a front and back view. So I would essentially have a full rotation of this vehicle. So I may do that. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to as of yet. It really does depend on time restrictions though. This claw light mechanism that you see me playing around with, I ended up removing that and just adding the extra exhaust that I originally had in the sketch, just because it worked better with the concept that I already had. So I decided to keep with that format. Just refining the perspective lines. I'm trying to keep everything very believable, so working out the proper structure and perspective is always something I try to keep in mind. Now what you saw me doing is, rather than 3D modeling an additional portion that I wanted to sketch out, I just really roughed it in very quickly as a box-like structure and then started working the details right on top. I found this was actually the fastest way to do additional portions of this vehicle. And if I were to redo this from scratch today, I would actually probably do that, but keep the floor grid, because the floor grid element does help a lot. But I don't necessarily find actually having the vehicle in place necessary. I could have easily had a cube, and I think I would have ended up with probably similar results. So now I'm just adding on to the second side, so I am making sure that in my viewport I can see both sides as I'm working. And initially I made it fairly small, so I actually just scaled it up and changed the transparency so that I could draw directly on top of it and make sure that the structure and the size ratio was correct. So I'm just adding some of the details for essentially the motors. And I'm experimenting to see how I'll be doing the structure. I ended up removing this because it just wasn't an appealing structure visually. So by curving this, I had a more appealing structure. I ended up going with that, and then duplicating my initial motor onto the other portions. Now, the silhouette for the vehicle wasn't looking that interesting as of yet, so I added an extension to the motor essentially, which can act as a ramp for occupants to actually enter and come in and out. And I did that on both sides. So this is the final line work, as you can see. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.